Welcome, everyone. Hey, this is a podcast that explores various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspectives, societal impacts, and related topics. This podcast often features discussions with experts, individuals in recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insights and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information about it. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards, and today we're going to be talking about trading beauty for ashes with our guest, Cade Cooper. Cade, thank you so much for being here, my friend.
You bet, brother. My pleasure.
You know, when I saw that trading beauty for ashes, it's like flipping light bulbs were just going off everywhere in my head. What is your meaning behind that?
Well, I think it's a biblical verse, right? That's where it derives from. I think it's Isaiah. I'm not sure, but I think understanding the culmination of how everything's so hard, right? Because especially caught up in addiction, and I have other things that I've felt as well. And at the time, it feels like ashes. You know what I mean? Like it feels like you're literally burning, and that's a good description of what it to be caught up in the jaws of addiction. Through my recovery process, and my belief is that like any trial in this life, God gives us trials in order to heal from them so we can help other people. And that's been my experiences. I've done my own channel and podcast and just in general worked with people with 12 step and different things like that. I've started to see the beauty out of it. I recently had another, not addiction related, well, kind of, but midlife crisis. But when I start to see the beauty of how that can benefit me and other people, then it seems like the beauty comes in. I no longer feel like I'm burning, so I'm trading beauty for ashes.
Very well explained. Yeah. And my version of all this really, Cade, is the ashes that we go through in our life actually come out to be the most beautiful. I mean, that's just how I see it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's so many of us who have gone through so many terrible things in our life, whether we're battling addiction or even if we are not, right? Certain traumas and mental health issues, or just, man, life can throw you punches from every direction. And you said it, it's meant to do that, to help us grow, to help us learn. However, once we stop and we put our mind to it and we really start looking at the message and the lesson behind it and where it actually can take us, and where a lot of times it does take us, my gosh, the beauty that comes out of it is just amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've had, so I don't have bipolar, but I have what's they refer to as a unipolar mania, meaning really extremely stressful situations can throw me into a manic episode. And I've had two of them in my life. In fact, I just had one this last year. That's why I had to wait a little bit to come on the show, because I was trying to pick up the pieces from all of that. But if people aren't familiar with mania, the DSM, it states some of the conditions, but you just lose the ability to, you lose control of things, you pleasure seek, you spend a lot of money, grandiosity and all these things, and you slowly lose touch with reality. And in my experience, and with a lot of people I've talked to, you feel like God is leading you, and you feel chosen. At one point, I thought that I was the God of this world, and there were all these things that came into play. And so, with this last one, I had 4 years clean, doing really good, right, and working my program and helping people. And as I slipped further and further into this mania, I just wasn't acting myself. I ended up eating mushrooms one night, and it in ways, I hate to call it a relapse, although it was, because it's just something I normally wouldn't have done, right? And then as soon as I got stabilized, then I'm 10 months clean again. So it was just picking back up the pieces. But throughout this, and then the first one I went to, I lost $1 million business, and my marriage started to go into it. And substance abuse was always in it, but it was frustrating to me to find the reason for it, right? Because it's not me that chose to have this thing, and it really is a brutal thing to go through. And I'm very fortunate that I don't have the depression side that would qualify me as bipolar, and I've only had two of these here. But the first time I went through it, I just went wild, Al, and like, you know, it's right when I started to get into addiction. And I took my company credit card and spent $10,000 in places I shouldn't have been, and it all happened in a night. And the first one was caused by a panic attack that lasted like 16 hours because it stresses the neurons in my brain too much, and so that's my brain's coping mechanism, is to create mania within me. And you know, it had such terrible ramifications in my life. And for a long time I was so upset at God, because you know, I was raised with in the Bible it says, there hath no temptation taketh you but such is common to man, and God is faithful and will not suffer you to be tempted above that you're able. And I didn't feel like in that situation that was accurate, because I literally was doing things that it was unprecedented for me. And so for a few years I went, and this was back in 2013, you know, so I lost the business, and we were just starting to do millions in revenue. I had to sell it to my partners. And you know, I just blamed God for a while, right? It's your fault. And I think one of the reasons resentments are so dangerous for us addicts is because if we can assign blame to someone else, then we're not conflicted when we use, because it's someone else's fault, right? And so I assigned the blame to God and thought, well, it's God's fault that I'm doing this. And so then the drugs started to numb me really, really well, because they didn't have to numb my conscience, because I felt like it was on him. Well, that didn't go very well. You know, I started in using a lot more of these things. And, you know, about a year and a half into that, it was always why me, why me? And I was in victim mentality. I was still trying. And I finally just, you know, was asking God, why, you know, why would you do this? Why? I've tried to follow you my whole life. Why do all this? And it came really strong to me. And the answer was, Cade, you're an addict, and you're about to come into a world where, you know, accessibility to all sorts of pleasure because of your level of income, you'll be able to get whatever you wanted. And also, you're the type of guy that when things go really good, you tend to forget me. And so I stepped in to save you. And in the process, I watched you badger me and demean me and scream and hurt my children. And I let you do it because I love you.
Yeah, man, that one hit me right there at the end, right? I let you do it because I love you.
Yeah,
You know, I'm not much of a religious type person. However, I'm very
sure,
spiritual, right? I
sure.
and especially this journey I've been on in the last almost 15 years, man, it's drawn me so close, right? Because when my ex-wife was going through her battle with alcoholism, I was doing the same thing that you did, Cade, and I was hitting my knees going, why? Why is this happening to me? I've done everything I can to learn how to be a better husband, and you know, I feel like I'm doing things right, and why is this happening? And it's kind of crazy because to jump back before that, I had spent 8 years of every Friday and Saturday night snorting coke and drinking. It was only
Hmm.
a Friday and Saturday night thing. Got my
Right,
act together on Sunday, worked my butt off all week. Friday came, it was party time, man. You know,
right.
it's time to let loose. And I remember many times partying at home and going into the bathroom to go to the restroom and looking in the mirror and asking God, man, please help me.
Hmm.
Because I know I'm starting to head down a bad road, right? I had gotten up to 198 pounds, hadn't ever weighed that much my whole life. And
Right,
I'm pounding the beers and drinking the whiskey and, you know, and the 3 years I dated my ex-wife, she had no clue I was snorting cocaine. That's how well I hid
sure,
it, you
sure.
know, because we get good at it, right? Of
Oh yeah,
hiding it.
oh yeah.
She couldn't ever figure out how I could drink so much and not get drunk. Once
Yeah,
I
the
once I
stimulants will
told
do
her and
that.
explained to her it's a balancing act. You start getting too high, you drink more alcohol. Start getting too drunk, snort more cocaine. So, you know, and me losing my job and hearing some of the things that people said about me that I didn't believe. It took me some time to realize they were right. It's what brought me back to God, right? I probably
Yep.
hadn't prayed since I was 13.
Right.
And I remember it took me some time to hit my knees because I was embarrassed to do it, right? And even after I lost my job, I think I was in the same boat you know you were at, is I was blaming him. No, this is not what I meant, right? I just lost a 24-year career.
Right.
However, I go back now and look where my life is at. Same with your life, right? I'm grateful to be here where I'm at right now. So, so grateful. And I've had people say, would you trade it in? Right? Would you go back and go through all that crap again? And that is a tough question. However, I have to really say yes, because it's turned me into a person who I never thought I could be. And it's a person I love for once.
Yeah, I love that, Al. That's beautiful, man. That's a beautiful story too. It's interesting, and I felt that too yesterday. So my business partner of that business, it was a pest business that we built up. Um, I had lunch with him yesterday, and he's one of my best friends, and we grew up together. So he's kept going in his business, and he's making a ton more money than I am. Right? I've got a small pest business. I still make a good living, but I'm not close to the trajectory that I would have been on there. And he's got a great life too. And it's not just because of money, but it's because of the way he lives and the way he treats people and stuff too. But it was interesting talking with him and thinking about some of those things, because I was just like, I could have been there. And like you, are there parts of me that want to go back and have all that money? Yeah, there is, right? But it's taken me time to be able to handle success and with God. Because, for me, when things are going to the knees like when I'm struggling, I'm on my knees and I'm pleading to ask God for help, right? And I start getting consistent in the things that I know brings him into my life. For me, it's reading the Book of Mormon or the Bible, it's praying, it's doing these things, right? But when things start to get good, I can get lax, right? And it's like, and I can kind of feel it now because I'm feeling good again, right? And it's like, do I need to do that this time? Is that a big deal? And I've gotten really structured, because this is my belief about God, is he gives us, or the universe, or whatever you want to call, or wherever you got, they care, he cares about what's best for you, right? But if I'm praying, I'm still single, I want to find a wife here eventually, I want these things, but if it's gonna pull me away from him, he's probably not going to give me that full thing, because he sees the large picture. And so for me, I think I've gotten to where he's like, okay, my son's getting it. He's being consistent despite his circumstances. He's staying close to me. So now I can really start to bless him with some of the things that I've always wanted to, and it's not going to pull him away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well put. And it, something popped in my head. I remember reading in Todd Sylvester's book, I Am Recovered, right?
Yeah.
That talked
Yep.
about how he heard these girls talking about fasting. And I hadn't fasted in a long time. So I called a good friend of mine up and I said, hey, brother, I need some help. I know you can help me. I'm like, how the heck do you fast? I don't remember how you fast, right? And he
Right.
told me, and he explained it to me, and what I needed to do. And he's like, can I ask you a question? And he always calls me Tiger. And he's like, can I ask you a question, Tiger? I'm like, yeah, sure, shoot. And he goes, why is it you want to fast? And I said, because God's mad at me.
Yep.
That's why I'm going through this. He's mad at me, right? Because I've left him out of my life for so long. And he goes, okay, first of all, God's not mad at you. He says, remember, everything that happens in your life that's good is him. Everything that's not is from the opposition. He goes, you just got to change your way of thinking, brother. And he goes, when you're done fasting, you say a prayer. And then he goes, you open that mind of yours up and you listen very, very closely. And you're going to get an answer. He says, it may not happen immediately, but he goes, you will get an answer. And by hell, he was 100% right. And there's still things that was going bad. And I had to keep telling myself that this is not him, right? And I also figured out during that time I hadn't learned my lesson. That's why he kept putting
Yeah.
me through it, because I hadn't learned my lesson yet. Is that
Yeah.
kind of what you have figured out as well?
I can absolutely relate to a lot of that. I'm still learning my lesson. When I meet women, I say I'm a reforming bad boy who's had work done, because I've had my hairline and stuff tattooed. So that's my initial come online. It hasn't worked yet, but I
Oh,
still say it. So you know, but those 2 points are extremely true. I think being raised in a strong household with my parents being active in the church, Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints, and teaching me these things. I think the narrative within the church, to an extent, and especially the culture, was one of toxic perfectionism, right? Where it was a really God-fearing thing, you know what I mean? And it wasn't any fault of my parents. I think part of it was we had the 60s come on, and we had all these things that just freaked people out and were kind of unprecedented, at least for our times. And so it was really strict. And so you know, as a result of that, I had the idea that whenever I made a mistake or it was trouble, God was mad at me. And the next bad thing that happened was going to be because I did that, right? And my mom, to get us to tell the truth, when we were in high school, she'd say, "Promise to Heavenly Father." And I'd say, "Yeah," because I feared her a lot more than Heavenly
Yeah.
Father at the time, you know? So, yeah. And then she'd be like, "I believe in." My dad would be like, "Ugh." My dad knew better, but I think understanding, my belief is that God is my father, right? And I liken the relationship to me and my kids. Let's say my kids do something wrong, and the first time I'm like, "Hey, knock it off," right? And if they do something wrong the 10th time, I'm gonna be like, "Knock it off." But the only reason I'm gonna be like that is because I love them and I know what is the best for them. And unfortunately for me, and it sounds like you, sometimes we need that 10th warning where God will throw something in to redirect my path. And he does that. But I'm in the same belief as you and your friend there. God does things for our benefit. And the moment I turn back to him, he opens up a new path for me every single time. And it's instantaneous, even though I may not see it instantly. And I can go that way and go close to him, or I choose another way and I continue to go away from him, but he intervenes at different times. And that's been the story throughout my life. Is I just seen it so much and come to rely on that. And like you, I never thought I would be like this or be the way. I study psychology, and I have a therapist that's he's a Southern Baptist out in Louisiana, and like he's taught me so many things. And like I've worked with people within the singles world and married people and young kids and stuff. So trying to do what you've done and take this pain and take these trials and to kind of put them in a situation where I can help people is really fulfilling.
Yeah. You know, I hope this doesn't sound like conceited in a way for both of us, right? And other people out there. I had a guest, and I've shared this on a show quite a few times, but I had a guest back in Colorado who, matter of fact, her son is clean now for almost 2 years. Her 30-year-old son was battling heroin addiction, and she had battled addiction as well, and was about 30 years clean, right? And she, greatest fear, just like our loved ones, when my wife was in the depths of her addiction, every time I kicked her out, I was always afraid that someone was going to grab her and rape her or whatever, and it's all these fears and of
Sure.
things that's going to happen. And um, gosh, where was I even going with this now? Oh, you know, gosh, now I don't remember. I just went
You you you
blank. And
you were you prefaced that with, "I hope people don't think we're being conceited here."
yeah, I remember saying that. Now I don't remember. Gosh, every once in a while this happens to me. I get a brain fog.
Oh,
But anyway, we'll start talking. It'll come back to me. It will definitely
sure.
come back to me. And I think it's just these lessons. I think at times when I finally got it, it's almost like, in a nice way, God slapped me upside the head, and He's like, "Come on,
Good.
wake up, right?
Yeah.
Get a clue." And oh, this is what I was going to say. All the people that I've interviewed, 200 and something shows, every single person except those who have come on the show who are professionals in mental health or trauma,
Hmm.
fitness, and things like that. Those who have battled
Hmm.
the addiction, it's that higher power, whatever their belief is in that higher power, okay, has helped them get through what they have gotten through. And this is where I was going to go. My friend in Colorado who I interviewed, she was talking to someone at church one day and said, "Look, I'm afraid every time that phone rings, I'm afraid it's going to be someone telling me my son's dead." And she says, "My friend told me this." She goes, "If your son is one of those that just cannot find that way to get himself through this addiction, remember, God's going to call him home to take that pain away for him, because he's having a hard time doing it on his own, and even with the tools God's given him, right? However, goes the other way. You have now become one of God's angels, and that's what I mean by not wanting people to think we're up on a pedestal, because we are not.
Sure.
We are now out there doing like what you do. We're out there putting our hand out, going, you know what? Let me help you. And there's so many of us out there that are doing it. And there's so many people, the majority of the people in the recovery community are doing exactly that. We're out there not even realizing it. I don't want to say saving lives, because I really believe they're saving our own selves, right?
Yep.
However, we're doing it all together, and there has to be. I think there's even a place in the Bible. I've shared this before. When Jesus started going around sharing his message, who did he pick as his disciples? Did he pick the perfect ones? Oh, hell no. You know,
Wild ones.
he picked the wild ones. Why? Because he knew, right? And I like to say that with those who are in long-term recovery. They're the wild ones. They're the crazy ones, and they've gone through all their trials and tribulations, and there's more that they're going to go through. However, they've got more of those tools and understanding to where now they can go out and help other individuals.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, if you look at Saul, who became Paul, right, in the Bible, and it persecuted Christ, or if I look in the Book of Mormon, I have Alma the younger, and different people there. And when you have that contrast of what it's like to live that way, and you've done it and you live the fruits of it, it's not very exciting anymore. I mean, I've got friends, Al, that are on all scopes, right? Some hate the church. I've got a brother who's gay, and I get along with everyone there. You know what I mean? But the people that fundamentally use people and are doing drugs and abusing themselves, they're just not happy, right? But I don't think they've reached the point where you and I have, where they haven't connected the dots yet and realized this is just not making me happy anymore. Whether it's me and being mad at God and just using like crazy, or you doing weekend benders and losing your job or whatever it is. I think it's been said that, rock bottom is when you stop digging, right?
Yeah.
So try to
Yeah.
stop digging, or we change behavior when the pain of persisting in the behavior is more than the pain of changing. So I got clean when the pain of getting clean was less than the pain of using that way. And as you mentioned, I think about the way God worked with other people to help me. And it was, for me, it took some really cutting remarks that were delivered with love in a way, but I needed people to tell me I was doing and how it was affecting people. Because addiction, it's the root of it is this self-centeredness, right? Where we're preoccupied with our feelings, and everything is affecting us. We've got this center of the world syndrome, and it makes it really hard to see what we're doing. Well, two quick examples is my little girl. She's 14 now, but I remember when she was 8, and I was talking to my therapist. I'm like, man, she's so smart for her age, and I love it, but she's so grown up, and I kind of don't, a little bit, because I just want her to be a kid a little bit, and it feels like we're missing out on a little bit of time there because she's just grown up. And he says, well, Cade, with how absent you've been in different parts of her life, and when you are using, you've caught her to forced her to grow up a little quicker, to deal with it. But he's like, the problem is when you're using, you pass on your pain to her because you're no longer feeling it because you're using. The real sad part is you've figured out a way to numb your pain, but she has no idea. That was brutal, man. It was one of the most painful things ever, because I realized what was happening, right? And I had used around my kids, and like I never used again with them. And so that was a big one for me. The other one was the last time I had smoked weed was 5 years ago. It was out in California, and I just started working the 12 steps, and I called my sponsor every day, and I got out there, and I didn't call them, and they had dispensaries, and like, you're supposed to take marijuana gummies, and I took like 18 of them. So that's the kind of addict I am, right? I am not functioning, and I can smoke weed all day long and be fine, but those gummies are another story, right? So it was really strong. And so I'd relapsed, and I called him, And I said, I relapsed. And he said, well, why didn't you call me? And I'm like, why do you think I didn't call you? Because you couldn't tell me not to use. I got mad. And he's like, Cade, maybe you need to get messed up and drive and hit a family and kill a family and a couple kids. And, you know, if that happens, I'll still come visit you in prison and try to help you. But maybe that's what you need in order to grow up. And then he said, don't call me till you get home. And he hung up the phone. And man, I thought about it, brother, because I have done that a lot. And in fact, one of my buddies is just getting ready to go to prison because he had hit a woman head on, going the wrong way on the freeway. And like she lived, but she's so messed up. And I'm like, why did God spare me when he didn't spare all these other people? I don't know, because they weren't doing anything any worse than I was doing quite often, right? But I could feel from him, hey, it's coming, you know? And so those two situations are examples, I think, of that. You know, as I work with addicts or we do these things, you know, we tell people because it opened me up, right? And as I started to gain that knowledge, I couldn't numb that stuff. You know, even though I was trying to get drunk, there was this thought: you're going to be very irresponsible driving, or you're going to pass this pain on to your daughter. And so those were the types of things that really started to get me clean.
Yeah. So he planted those seeds in your head and they started basically growing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where you had no choice but to think
Yep.
it. Yeah.
Yep.
I like to use the example of my Holy Spirit. That's what I call it. That's the voice that I get in my head, you know, and I do believe we get chances, right? I believe he shoots over the bow quite a few times to say,
Sure.
hey, you know, you better start paying attention and get your act together. If not, you're going to sink pretty quick. And it is crazy. You know, I've gone back and looked at a lot of stuff that my ex-wife, I mean, I stood by her. Gosh, we were together 18 years and I stood by her for many years throughout her addiction, gave her all the support I could, not even understanding. Of course, I was her addiction therapist, which I was very crappy at it because I didn't know anything about addiction. I thought I did, right? I
Right.
failed at it miserably. One of the reasons why I do the show now, so other people can be educated and learn not to do
Sure.
what I did wrong. And all the many times she came so close, you know, so close that something terrible could have happened to her. So close. And I do believe God was there watching over her because she got herself in some pretty bad situations and somehow just walked out unscathed, right? And it broke my heart when she relapsed after 2.5 years last year. It
Yep.
tore me up. And that was basically the piece of straw that broke the camel's back. Cause I'm like, I'm not sticking around for this again. Cause
Sure.
she didn't fall off the horse and get back on. She fell off the horse and continued,
Yep.
you know, to go at that direction. And it's hard for people on the other side to see, right? Like what you said, we don't understand the damage we're doing outside of everything because we're so caught up in our own little shell. It's like we're in this bubble and we think we're the only ones that's feeling whatever it is and damaging ourselves. You know, I don't know how many times I'd come home and she'd still be in bed and she's wasted. I could just, as soon as I walked in the house, I could smell the alcohol.
Yep.
And it's like, why didn't you go to work today? And it's like, you know, what the F doesn't matter to you? It's not hurting you. And
Right.
it's, well, it is because it's money to help pay the bills, right?
Right.
I can't do this all on my own, right? I need you. And then a lot of times where she was saying that, she relapsed because, you know, she felt like she had to rebel. And I'm like, you're a freaking grown woman.
Yep.
You're not a teenager. You're not rebelling against your parents. But, you
Right.
know, understanding now what I know now, I can get where she was coming from. Okay,
Right.
let me change that. I cannot get where she's coming from. I just have a better understanding of it.
Sure. I can empathize with her a little bit. Being an addict is to the mind frame a little bit there. You know, it's interesting if we're talking about Christ again and the apostles, like, and him helping us in situations like that. You know, I was also raised to believe he couldn't come in certain places, right? Like, you know, and I think that, you know, within the confines of my belief, you can have the spirit to different measures, no matter depending on where you're at, right? But Christ goes everywhere for me. And, he went into the red quarter and he taught the people that were in the slums. And I've been in situations and in environments where I thought he was never able to go. And he came and not just came powerfully in different ways. And so that's helped me realize, those dark times is really when it was the closest. You know what I mean? This last episode, at one point, I'd eaten a bunch of mushrooms. I got punched at the hospital by a nurse for being an idiot, a male nurse. And I was laying down in LA, tripping so hard between being in a manic episode and being on mushrooms. I could barely breathe and I was hallucinating, and there were homeless people walking around, different things. And I could just feel this protection.
Wow.
I could feel it, like this goes so far and then I come in, because this one, again, like it was just a manufacture of my chemistry that went off that caused this one, right? So it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't decisions that I'd made on my end to bring about this stuff. So, but it's, as you talk about helping people, and all the addicts that you bring on, everyone, and you're the same, right? We help people. Well, that's the fundamental part, right? To staying sober, you know what I mean? Because when I'm working with a little 16-year-old kid, or helping the husband, the wife's ready to leave him, or the woman who is being abused, or whatever it is, when I start to see those changes come in, and when I start to see God come into them, and when I hear their gratitude, man, that gives me a feeling that drugs could have never given me. And any drug or sexual high or whatever, it just pales in comparison to that. So that's my new drug, right? Is creating that change in people's lives.
Yeah, I had a guest, his name's Corey. He works out at the Other Side Academy, and that's what he said his new drug is. He goes, the high that I get, the dopamine hit that I get from helping other individuals and seeing their growth, he goes, is far more better than, or far greater than, any drug that I ever took.
And there's no withdrawal,
Yeah,
so
I know which drugs that want to maybe do it again.
right. It's interesting. With God's work, you don't develop a tolerance. I've learned that, right? With drugs, we're usually chasing our initial high and we never can quite get it, right? But like, you get a tolerance from these things. Well, with God's work, I've never gotten a tolerance. When someone's said how thankful they were for something I've done, it's always been really impactful for me. You had alluded at the beginning. I started my YouTube channel podcast like 2 years ago. And it's been interesting to do it because I'm heavily connected within the single world here, being a single guy, and I'm very open with stuff. And I've been posting on social media, writing for a long time, just my reality. And so I got a decent following there. And at some point, I could feel the stirring, probably like you felt, like, hey, you need to do a channel, you need to share these things. And my format's interesting because a lot of them have been individual episodes about specific topics, whether it's codependency or ancient avoidant attachment. It's not all addiction by any means, and then I would bring people on to come and help. But I also, my therapist is like, you take your diary and you put it online, Kate. And it's all fine and good when it's healed trauma, but it's a different when I was going through this last thing, because it just, I had some public events that were really public, and it kind of blew up, and like, everyone was very aware of it, and it was an extremely hard situation to go through publicly. And like, I don't think people at the time understood that I was manic, or the mania that came along with it. But it's been like yours, it's been a very difficult thing for me to do in a lot of ways, but I know God wants me to do it, number one. And when I get the messages from people, like I'm sure you get, the little ones that come in, right, that you don't
Yeah.
share or people don't see, that's what gives me the strength to keep going, to keep owning my weaknesses and owning my strengths, and just throwing everything out there just how it is. And there's just letting the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, there's been a few messages that when I've read, my eyes have definitely filled with tears, right? Going, all right, thank you, God. This is
Yeah.
why I'm here, right? This is exactly why I'm here. And everything that you're doing, Cage, opening up and being so vulnerable, your ripple effect is so huge that, I mean, you don't even know it, right?
Right.
You're saving so many other people out there that you may never ever meet, and maybe hopefully one day you'll meet a few of them, where they'll
Yep.
come up to you and go, "Oh my gosh, I know you. This episode, you saved my life that
Yep.
day."
Yep.
Right? And I think that happens with so many of us in the recovery community, whether you do a podcast or you do the public speaking or you work at a recovery center, whatever it may be. We're changing so many lives, and to me that's huge, and I'm seeing more of it starting to happen, and I have my own version of it, why it's happening,
Sure.
and it's needed right now for sure. So we've got to open up, and when we can open up too, it's like when I first shared my story last January for the very first time. Such a huge weight came off my shoulders that I didn't even
Yep.
realize I was carrying, and the person that was interviewing me on my show, she was my guest co-host that ended up being my host, and I was the guest. And she's like, "Oh, I was just watching everything just fall off of you like butter, like melted butter, right?" And she goes, "I
Yep.
started watching you sitting up taller and watching the beat, and we don't realize how much pain and how much crap we're carrying around in our lives until we can open up." And my show earlier today was a beautiful lady named Amy Chandler with My Story Matters, and they're out of Provo. And she shared some stuff, and she shared one of a gentleman that's in prison, and she was working with him to open up his mind to say, "Look, you can become anything that you want." And he's like, "Well, I've got a lot of sentence left, right? My life's over." Anyway, the work that they do with these individuals really started changing. And she asked if she could share a letter that he wrote to her. And she shared this letter, and it was what an amazing letter. And this guy's real dream is to be a Navy SEAL, right? And to hear him, what he had written on there was just amazing. And I love that he used "I am," because I'm a firm, I really do believe the words that follow "I am" follow you. And
Yep.
he was saying that I am a Navy SEAL, and even though I'm in prison, I am a Navy SEAL because I have a group of individuals, of brothers that stick by me, and we have all this love. And it was just amazing, and that's why I enjoy doing these shows with people like yourself, to that open up and share a part of their life that maybe they're not so proud of, or they probably are not proud of.
Mhm.
However, to see who they are today is proof that there's something greater than us out there that's helping us on a journey that's not a easy journey to be on. And it does everything it can to pull you right back to where you dug yourself out of, because it's a fight every single day.
Yeah, it definitely is. We think about vulnerability, and people are always talking about vulnerability, but a lot of what I see in the self-help world is not true vulnerability, because the stuff they share is not in danger of hurting them. It still is good stuff, right? And it can still help a lot of the time. But when we start to share stuff that, is danger of affecting our personal lives, like my channels, it's not huge by any means, but it's longer content like yourself. And like I took 9 months off of it, but I think I'm right around 10,000 views now. So it's circulated, but it's especially circulated within my single world. You know what I mean? And here I
Mm-hmm.
am, an LDS guy, like I want to get married, right? I want to do the whole thing. And I'm online posting I'm an addict. And I'm also posting that I have these manic episodes, right? And the good thing about the manic episodes is I take small medication now, and I know what causes them, so I'm not worried about that anymore. But still, it's like, what am I doing here, God? Like, I know it's helping people. I do, like, because I get the lessons, but that's been really hard for me to share some things, because like I said earlier, it's not as hard for me to share trauma that's been resolved, but when I'm in the thick of it and talking about it, that's kind of another thing, you know what I mean? But I'm grateful to God, because He's given me some special assurances about things coming in my life. I'll just say that have kind of helped me to be able to distance what people think as opposed to what I share, right? And like I think in the end, I truly care what everyone thinks. I don't know if we cannot care, but it doesn't matter, because
Right.
I want people to care. I want people to care, but if they don't, it doesn't matter. And my stuff can be pretty polarizing. I'm a pretty polarizing guy. I'll have friends that'll call me and be like, I saw your stuff 4 months ago and I hated it. I couldn't listen to it. And then some circumstances or something changed in my life and I was receptive, and now, and now I love it. So, but I love what you're doing, brother. And like, I think your story's so neat, because being married to an addict, that makes us sick in and of ourselves. We get in this codependent relationship, right? Where we're
Mhm.
addicted to the chaos of their stuff and we become addicted to cleaning them up. And then our life starts to fall apart because we don't have time to take care of ourselves, and we're taking care of them. And I've been that way too, very much. I've been addicted to many people, but I think it's kind of unique, Al, your story, because I'll be honest, I know a ton of people in the recovery community out here, but it sounds like you probably don't identify as an addict, but you have helped an addict, so it's really neat to talk to you and hear your story and hear what you're doing from that perspective.
Yeah, and even just to elaborate just of what you just said, I had a guest on my show, and we were talking about some things, and he goes, Al, if you think about it, you was addicted to your wife's addiction.
Yep.
And it stopped me in my tracks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he is so right. I mean, even right now I got goosebumps, right? Just
Yep.
thinking about it. And yeah, and I really didn't identify myself as an addict, right? Because I've had some people go, well, you were an addict. You did it every weekend for 8 years. Other people said, no, you're not. And then I've had other people go, it's your decision. How is it you look at it? Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, right?
Right. Right. Right.
How is it that you look at it? And then to turn around and fall out of mine and start working on me just for my ex-wife to fall into hers. I mean, I jumped out of one cesspool right into another, right? Very, very
Yeah.
quickly. And
Yeah.
and again, though, this was the path that I was meant to be on. That
Yep.
I've connected the dots backwards, and I think you see the same thing. You connect the dots backwards. This is where we're supposed to be at right now, and thank you for everything that you do as well, Cade. Right? Because it's not easy to open up. It really isn't, and share your life with other individuals. Because how many of us are already ashamed and already, like you just said, worried about what everyone else is thinking, and we hold ourselves back too much because of that, I believe.
Yep. No, I think so, 100%. I think, oh, now I'm losing my train of thought. I'm getting old too. You
Yeah.
know, but as we share these things, and as we're vulnerable, it's just been really neat to kind of see where it goes. My channel, and Al will have a link to it. I finance everything. I run everything. I just put time into it. I don't have any ambitions anymore. I did it one time,
Yeah.
but it's just strictly to help people. But it's I like to hear the persevering of the human spirit, right? I like to hear these things. They're what kind of moves me, and for me, I like to hear what you've been through. Oh, it's come back now. I got asked to give a talk in state conference a couple of years ago, and I swear the stake president by the end was about ready to stop, because I I just say it how it is, right? And I don't say it
Right.
much different than another meeting. And honestly, I believe in my church wholly, but I think we need a little shot of adrenaline sometimes when it comes to those things and vulnerability, right? Because the culture can be incredibly shame based and cause a lot of issues for people. But I was essentially talking about how I had messed up with a gal, and like my daughter was going to go do baptisms for the dead, and I wasn't able to baptize her, and how painful that was for me. And her stepdad did, and I waited outside of the building for her, and I was it was hard. And there was a guy that came up and he started talking to me, and he's a temple worker, just showed more interest in me than normal. Well, he ended up finding me on social media a while later, and he said, I want to tell you what happened. He said, when I saw you, he said, first of all, I wasn't going to go where you were, but I just felt this stirring to go back where you were. And I kept fighting it, and it was stronger and stronger. And then I got in there and I saw you sitting there with your son, because my son was too young to go in. And he said, I got the impression the Lord knows and loves this man. So he came up, man. He started talking to me. I didn't know if the guy was real or an angel. Like but he said, hey, I've arranged for the temple president to open up for just you and your daughter to come and just do this alone late at night. And it was such a special situation for me. So, it's another example of the culmination of, hey, if we stick with God and if we go through these things, we're going to be blessed. I think the tough thing for us addicts is, drugs, alcohol addictions, they heal pain immediately, right? Like they will stun it in its tracks. My experience with God is it takes longer usually, and we don't rarely get that immediate gratification. But in the long term, God wants to expose whatever's triggering us so we lose power over it, right? But he can't do that if we come in and use drugs or alcohol, because I believe that works on the same part of the brain as God does, the prefrontal cortex. But he's like, hey, if you can just see this through and just fill it for a little bit, you're going to learn a valuable lesson in the process. And so for me, it's been tough to be patient, right? I've had to be patient a lot. I've had to be patient with dating. I've had to be patient with these things. But as I'm starting to learn to just feel everything, it's really a beautiful way.
Yeah, amen to that. It makes life bearable, even with all the crap that's going on outside, right? It really does. It's worked for me anyway. I remember hitting my knees one morning and just going, all right, I'm throwing in the towel, because every time I do my best to make something work, all I do is mess it up, you know.
Right.
And I come to realize I'm not here to take control of my life. I mean, I am, however, to be directed, right? Because my choices aren't always the best choices, and I'm sure you know that as well. And
Sure.
when we leave our life up to the higher power, whatever that is for our listeners, and that it's God for me, life seems to go a little bit better. Yeah, I'm going to run into a brick wall many times. It's just because he's there doesn't mean I'm not going to hit it, because I will.
Right.
And
Yep.
again, it's just another lesson that I have to learn. Well, do I go under? Do I go over? Do I go around? Do I stop and think about this for a while? So yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying. And that is cool about that guy allowing you to do that,
Yeah.
to have that opportunity.
It was definitely a special experience. I was thinking that, and now I remember the other thing when we're talking about you. And so I've done intervention work quite a bit too, where I'll go. And if we're talking about helping family members and stuff, sometimes when we're so connected with our loved ones, it's really hard to reach them, right? Because we create this oxytocin within us because we've got this existing relationship, and we're biased to emotion and stuff. So when we're screaming at our loved ones to get better, it's not registering all the time. I know a guy who is like, Cade, my wife's in love with my therapist. I'm like, why is that? He's like, because I've been telling her the same thing for a year. And we went the first day and he said the exact same thing. And she thinks he's the most wonderful man in the world. I'm like, she's not in love with your therapist, brother. You guys create oxytocin that neutralizes her fear. And so there's very little therapeutic effect when it comes to situations like that. But sometimes when I went into these situations, the enabler or the codependent person that thinks they want the addict to get better is sicker than the addict,
Yeah.
because they're just numbing themselves on this. And I see it with parents and children. And I don't like to use the term codependency with parents to children. Maybe more enabling is a softer term because we're just built that way. But I'm trying to get them to set boundaries, right? So okay, here's the deal: if your son or daughter uses, she can't come home and she doesn't get any money. And it's always the same thing. Well, she'll threaten to kill herself. I'm like, this is not always the case, but usually when addicts are threatening to kill themselves, we don't kill ourselves out of spite. We threaten to do it in order to get what we want. But I'm like, that's a worst case scenario. But what you need to realize is your daughter is already dying. She's just dying a slow death. And if you're not strong enough to set that boundary there, you're going to be complicit to an extent when that happens. You got to give her a chance by providing, consequences to her actions. It's the same with you and your ex-wife. My view is that I'm sure that was a really painful decision, but I think that was the most loving thing you could do for her, is help her to experience it happened with me in my divorce, the pain of the divorce, in order for her to change.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I was looking at it as hopefully it's the healthier way, right? Because in 2019, it was so bad. I was on my way home from a networking group, and I'm like, I know how to get her to stop. Because remember, I was addicted to her addiction. I
Sure.
made my mind up. I was heading home to go get my pistol and go up in the mountains, and I was going to take my life because
Yes.
I couldn't handle coming home to it anymore. I just could not. It was World War III every single flipping day.
Yep.
And it was taking me to a whole different level. I mean, I went to therapy in my mid-20s to learn how to control an anger issue that I had. It took me 6 months of therapy to really tame that monster.
Right.
It was getting to the point where that monster was ready to show its head, and it was getting close, right? It was like Alien, where that damn thing was about ready to come out of my mouth. And it was scaring me because I knew if I allowed that to happen, I would be the one to end up going to jail because I was going to do something that I really, really would regret.
Right. Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough. Yeah.
I think the results, and as we talk about anger, and typically the primary emotion to anger is fear, right? We're scared and we're nervous, and it manifests in anger. And I see it all the time in the world today, Al. And one of the things I'm so grateful for being in recovery, it's taught me to control what I can control, because you and I, it's not in our scope of influence to choose the president, right? We should still vote, but is our vote going to matter here in Utah? Very strong probability it won't, right? But I see people lose their peace all the time over these situations which they can't control, whether it's that, or it's a foreign war, or it's inflation, or these different things. And I get that these are stressful things, and they can be, but God has helped me a lot through the serenity prayer to control what I can control, right? And so I've
Yeah.
I've come to the point where if something happens to me and I didn't cause I can't do anything about it. I'm not going to stress about it. My belief is that's just part of my moral journey and something that God wants me to come through. Because believe me, I've got enough problem with self-inflicted stuff to keep my mind busy, right? But like
Yeah.
I look at the news and I'm like, I'm protected. I feel this protection from God no matter what. And that doesn't protect me from trials and tribulations, but it does protect me from anything outside of what's supposed to happen to me, so long as I do. So, the peace that I have is, that's the primary thing I want in this life, right? I want happiness. I want all these things, but I just want to feel peace. And I think at this point, I'm 42 years old. I've reached a point where most of my life is pretty peaceful.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you on that one. I hit 60 last July, and
Oh, you look good, bro. You don't
oh, well,
look
thank
60.
you. Thank you. And that's just how I want it to be, right? I just want the rest of it to be as smooth sailing as possible. I look at life, and it took me all the way into my 50s to really figure out what my why was, right? And
Yep.
I know what it is now, and I'm good with it. I'm
Yep.
excited about it. And I'm grateful that I've gotten my relationship back with God, because I was just so caught up in my own self all those other years. And
Yep.
yeah, so I'm very grateful. We're coming up pretty close to the hour. I like to ask guests. Well, first of all, um, how can people find you're on YouTube, right? It's getting your life back
Cade Cooper.
with
So
Kid
it's
Cooper.
it's getting without a G, Gettin.
Okay.
Your life back with Cade Cooper. Cade is with a C. I also It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, and it's on Amazon as well for just the audio. That way you don't have to look at me. So I get views that way too. And then I've shot a link to Al as well. I'm pretty active on social media as well, where I'll share different clips and things. So, like I said, it's just to help. And if it doesn't resonate with someone, that's totally fine. But I think there's some stuff that probably is, gonna kind of affect that way. So that's how you can find me.
Yeah, all it takes is one person, right? I've had so many people come on the show and say that it's like all I need to do is just touch one soul, just one,
Yep. Yep.
and I did what I needed to do, right? Because we all know that it'll snowball. It'll
Yep.
definitely snowball. That's for
Yep.
sure. What what did you want our listeners to gain from this show, or what would be your main message?
I think hope, Al, more than anything else. Like, I know what it's like to not want to live. I know what it's like to feel the world surrounding around you. I went through my share of trauma, and for me, despair is the worst feeling ever, right? And when you're in the thick of despair, and especially when you're in the thick of addiction, you don't think it's possible. But the God of heaven, he's got a perfect track record, so he's a proven asset. Um, I believe the 12 steps is a phenomenal way. I don't think it's the only way, but I think it's a phenomenal way to get clean. But we've got all these different programs out there that are proven, they work. So the only variable in this situation is us, right? And when I work with people all the time, that's what I tell them. I'm like, look, this program has worked. It works, right? It worked for me. It worked for millions of people. God, if you give him a chance, however you believe in him, like you said, of your understanding, he'll manifest himself that way. Because I think at this point, he's much more concerned about you having a relationship with him, than trying to figure out exactly how everything works that way. But if you're open, he'll manifest himself to you. And I promise you that. And for me, the God of my understanding is the same God of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I view him way, way, way differently now. And I'm an outlier within the church in a lot of ways because I'm strict with the doctrine. I definitely believe it, but my views on things are ever evolving and changing, even when it comes to God, because I'm very open to just truth and always informs. And in my life, it's led me back to that. In your life, it's led you the way you are. And I'm not going to say Al's wrong. There's no way I am, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think you're where you need to be. And I think I'm where I need to be. And in the end, I think the loving God, whatever the situation is, he's just going to continue as long as we're open. He's going to lead us along our path. And that looks different for all of us. But that's what I would say is stay open to that belief in God. Stay open to it. For me, it's God, if there is a God, and if you are God, will you make yourself known unto me?
Yeah, very well put. Very well put. Because it's not up to us to change someone's perspective because the way we see it differently, right?
Yep.
And I'm a firm, yeah, I believe in that so hardly. It's not my job to do it because we whatever's working for you works for you, right? And it's
Yep.
not my job to say, no, you're doing it wrong. This is what you need to do. Because it may not work for them, right? It's like people who go through different types of recovery. I mean, some people have to go through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 13, 15 before that one finally connects for them, right? Yeah,
3 for
3.
me.
Yeah, my ex was 8, right? And I've had other guests who 13, 14, and then just all of a
Yep.
sudden a certain one clicks. So
And
our journey is our own journey, and we have to stay on our own side of the street and just give as much love and kindness and understanding to everyone possible.
yep.
Yeah. Well, Cad, thank you so much, man. Or Cade.
You're good.
Cad again.
You're
Anyway,
good, brother.
Cade, thank
My
you
grand
so
my,
much.
my grandma, when I was named Cade, they're like, they're gonna call him Cad. So
Yeah, yeah.
it happens. You're good. It's my pleasure, brother. It's really neat to have a conversation with you. I know Andrea had introduced us that way, and like I could feel a stirring to want to come on. But I love hearing your story. I love what you're doing. I've looked a little bit into it. I've been so busy, but it sounds like you're helping a ton of people. So it's the honor is mine, really, Al.
No. Well, thank you. I appreciate your kind words. And again, thank you for taking time. And I hope we have a chance to meet in person someday. And
Yeah, love it, brother.
who knows, man, maybe down the road, there's something we'll hook up and do together. I don't know. You never know.
Sure wouldn't surprise me the way my
Yeah,
life
right?
goes. So
Yeah. All right, brother. Thank you again. Hey, thank you to all our other past guests, all our past sponsors, and thank you the most to all our listeners. You guys are the ones that's making this possible. I just want to say, man, I love y'all and appreciate y'all. And remember this, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.